It's being called a win for workers, a loss for the Ford government at Ontario's Court of Appeal. A law imposing salary restraint on those in the public sector ruled unconstitutional. Good evening. Known as Bill 124, capping wage increases for professions like nurses and teachers at 1% for 3 years.
Billed as a way to eliminate a deficit, now struck down. CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris is live with our top story. Siobhan.
Well, when the government introduced Bill 124, it said it was necessary to rein in spending in a difficult economic time. Ontario's top court said today that they could have turned to collective bargaining to accomplish that goal and instead violated unionized workers' rights.
It's a blow for the Ford government. A second court has found its wage capping legislation, Bill 124, is unconstitutional.
Today is a victory for workers, for Ontario's labour movement, and for our healthcare, education, and public services.
In a 2-1 decision, Ontario's Court of Appeal found the bill that held public sector wage increases at 1% a year violated charter rights, those connected with association and collective bargaining.
Calling on the government to not appeal this court decision, workers are 2-0. Have you noticed?
No indication yet from the finance minister if the government will ask the Supreme Court to weigh in.
We'll take the time to take a look at it thoughtfully and deliberately. I know it affects a lot of people, so we want to make sure in the period of time that we have to make a decision, we'll be thoughtful about it.
Bethlyn Falvey can't say how much more the province will have to fork out in catch-up pay to workers whose wages were held back. The government spent $1.7 billion more on healthcare last quarter, much of that going to extra compensation.
It's a moving thing. All I can say is that we're very prudent in making sure that we plan responsibly.
Not every worker covered by Bill 124 has been entitled to back pay. The Court of Appeal also found the rights of workers who aren't covered by a union weren't violated here.
We are not leaving any worker behind. And so we are going to be working collectively to bring awareness of where that is and to apply pressure to the government and to the employers to do the right thing.
In the years the government has spent digging in, defending the controversial legislation,
they have lost the respect of Ontarians, in fact, nurses and healthcare professionals.
Motivating some to leave the profession entirely.
What they have gained is a reinvigorated labor movement. We'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court, but on the way, we will make their lives hell.
We did get an update today from the finance minister on the state of our finances in the third quarter. That's when our deficit was $4.5 billion. That's about $1 billion less than in our last update in November, but still much higher than the government had anticipated in last year's budget. Our next major update on Ontario's finances will come in this year's budget, due before the end of March. Reporting live from Queen's Park, I'm Siobhan Morris. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. And straight ahead, it's a big week for Toronto's mayor. A vote on the budget looming, a hefty property tax increase on the table, and fresh evidence Olivia Chow's popularity is already paying the price.
If you rely on services like Uber or Lyft, you're going to want to pay close attention to this. Ride-hailing drivers preparing to shut off their apps later this week, part of a worldwide strike.
Calling for better working conditions and higher pay, as new figures suggest some drivers take home just a fraction of minimum wage. CTV's John Woodward is live with more on this. John.
Michelle, you may not be able to get a quick ride or a delivery come Wednesday because some of those drivers will be rallying in downtown Toronto on strike for better pay.
Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver drivers have had it up to here.
Sick of being exploited, driver Erla Phillips says, by the app companies that control the workdays of gig economy workers like her. Drivers from several Canadian cities are joining workers in dozens of U.S. states and European countries to walk off the job on Valentine's Day, February 14th.
This is a worldwide global protest. We're going on strike.
Not the first gig workers strike, but perhaps the biggest so far, she says. The news coming after a report by advocacy organization Ride Fair that claimed drivers in Toronto are sliding into what it called legislated poverty.
I recently went out for a shift last week, 2-hour shift, and the total earnings for that shift were $5.40. So I can speak in experience that we are facing a crisis.
At issue, their claim that drivers regularly make less than Ontario's minimum wage of $16.55 an hour. They say their study indicates that ride-hail drivers' median pay is actually $6.37 an hour, and the difference is going into app companies' pockets to the tune of $200 million a year.
That's just the median. That represents the middle. About half of hourly earnings by this measure are lower. There is no floor. Right now, Toronto drivers can and do make far less.
Uber, a major employer, said in a statement, cherry-picking 96 weekly earnings statements from tens of millions of trips is shoddy methodology. In November, median earnings were $33.35 for engaged time in the city of Toronto. Ontario law entitles drivers to a minimum wage for engaged time, a metric that includes time ferrying passengers, but not being ready and waiting for work. Drivers want more, even to be fully classified as employees.
I think this is an unprecedented event, and I am so proud of every gig worker who is going to stand up and speak in unison about the conditions, the pay, which is unacceptable in Canada in 2024.
They're hoping the companies and the government are listening. The drivers will begin their rally at 9 a.m. on Nathan Phillips Square on Wednesday. That's Valentine's Day. There'll be speakers, and then they'll get in their vehicles and drive around downtown. So they will continue to fight then for getting paid for what they think they are worth. Reporting live, I'm John Woodward. Back to you.
All right, thank you, John. Some of the downtown's busier TTC routes will soon be impacted by, you guessed it, more construction. Starting this upcoming Sunday, construction between Shaw and Dufferin will affect the 63 Ossington, 501 Queen, 504 and 304 King, and 508 Lakeshore routes. The 504 King streetcar will divert onto Queen Street. The changes come as the city replaces aging water mains and streetcar tracks along King West. Work is expected to be finished by the end of the year.
And the city says it will start enforcing paid on-street parking on statutory holidays, beginning on Family Day. The change is being made in response to what the city calls evolving needs, including a significant increase in the demand for parking. The city says the previous decision to not enforce on-street parking on holidays was rooted in previous bylaws and operational choices.
From complaints about one app to another, a scathing new report from Canada's Auditor General into ArriveCan.
And a lack of government oversight in the development of the program that could be behind ballooning costs running into the tens of millions. CTV's Colton Prale reports.
A glaring disregard for basic management and some of the worst financial record-keeping she had ever seen. That's how the Auditor General described the process at Canada's border agency during the creation of the ArriveCan app to manage international arrivals during the pandemic.
They don't believe that an emergency is a reason that all the rules are thrown out the window.
In a damning report, Karen Hogan describes a project that ballooned from $80,000 to nearly $60 million. Where financial oversight was so lax, contractor invoices frequently didn't note the work performed, but were paid anyway.
It is really glaring, some of the most basic things that we're missing here. It's a bit of a head scratcher as to why it didn't happen.
Ottawa says they're already implementing Hogan's recommendations, like ensuring potential bidders don't also have a hand in crafting contract application requirements.
Taxpayers' money needs to be treated with the utmost respect. In no way are we going to defend this particular contracting process.
Questions around who oversaw construction of the app have swirled since its release. Hogan says GC Strategies, the highest paid contractor involved, didn't submit a proposal but still won the tender.
There was no cozy relationship, no conspiracy, and no fraud.
Opposition parties say it's evidence of the Prime Minister's financial irresponsibility.
He's taken $60 million of your tax dollars and given it to a corrupt app.
One big unanswered question is about any potential relationships between border officials and the vendors. The Auditor General found dinner invites and other activities, but is leaving that part of the investigation to the CBSA and the RCMP. Colton Prale, CTV News, Ottawa.
Still ahead, added to the list of growing costs, why the price of booze could be set to rise and the calls for a cap.
But first, there's a live look outside on this Monday evening from our news chopper. Still not what we're used to in February, but is a return to some sort of normal on the horizon. Michelle Jobin is here with a look at the current conditions. Michelle.
Well, Nathan, yeah, today a little milder than our normals. For perspective, a high at this time of the year should be around -1. We reached 4 degrees and relatively light winds. Not much happening on our radar and satellite imagery. That's all going to change tomorrow. Winds are out of the southwest right now, quite light at 9 kilometers an hour. And that is giving us right now 2 degrees feeling like -1. So negligible. Overnight tonight, -5 though, feeling like -10. Winds shifting to be more out of the northwest, tapping into cooler air. Tomorrow, very gusty winds, a much cooler feel, and we've got some more normal overnight lows on the way. We'll talk more about that coming up. Back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, it is a pivotal week in the young life of Olivia Chow's time as mayor. Her first budget up for a vote.
With a significant property tax on the table, new polling suggests the honeymoon is already over. CTV's Mike Walker is live with more. Mike.
Well, Nathan, Michelle, a new poll showing that the mayor's approval rating has dropped from the mid-70s down to 55%. That budget is a contributing factor, which the mayor defended today at an announcement for a new affordable housing development here in Scarborough.
3, 2, 1.
Ground officially broken for an affordable housing project in Scarborough near Nielsen and Sewells that has been 5 years in the making.
We in Toronto are desperately in need of affordable housing, affordable rental housing.
The federal government providing millions in funding in repayable loans. The first phase will include 201 affordable rental units that will prioritize women, their children, and people with physical disabilities.
The housing is at the center of well-being for all Canadians, and a roof over people's head is so essential.
Housing a priority in the mayor's budget that will be debated by council on Wednesday, one that includes a historic 9.5% property tax increase. But that proposed hike is contributing to a significant drop in the mayor's support.
Well, it looks like the honeymoon is over.
A new Liaison Strategies poll found that the mayor's approval rating has dropped to 55% after recently being as high as 71%. Only 47% of respondents support the proposed budget.
There are some people who want to see more services from the city, who want to see taxes go up, but there's another cohort of people who are not happy with this at all.
Responding to the poll,
their numbers.
The mayor standing by her proposed budget.
We need to fix our city. And yes, I inherited a big budget deficit, and that's why we have to start paying our way.
Chow's stance on crime also contributing to the dip, with the police budget $12 million less than what the Police Services Board approved. Expected to be a contentious issue during the budget debate.
Well, this is about creating cohorts of new officers.
Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey among councillors advocating for the city to fulfill the force's budget requests.
If Chief Demkew is saying that they need an additional $12.6 million, I have every confidence in him and in that ask.
Chow reiterating today she will not use her strong mayor powers to veto any changes made to the budget by council.
Because I believe that 50% plus 1 is how I define democracy.
The poll also found that 49% of respondents believe the city is heading in the right direction, with the top issue being affordable housing, followed by transit and crime. Reporting live, I'm Mike Walker. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. Next to a case of buyer beware, a Guelph man out nearly $12,000. He found a vehicle on Facebook Marketplace, and after a smooth test drive, he bought it with cash.
When he brought the car for registration, he learned it was stolen, and he had to turn it over to police. CTV's Stephanie Davis has more.
That's a happiness for me. It was temporary.
This red Honda CR-V seemed like the perfect fit for Omid Gadimi.
That car seems good, looks good, yeah.
He found the SUV on Facebook Marketplace. After texting the apparent owner, Gadimi and his mom went from Guelph to Mississauga to see it early in February. He says the seller showed him the Carfax and the test drive went well, so he bought it. $11,500 cash.
We deal with the price and I give him cash. And he gave me 2 keys and all of the documents.
Gadimi went to Service Ontario to get new plates, but when they scanned the vehicle identification number, things took a turn.
They told me he has a problem. This car has a problem. You should go to police office.
He brought the car to Guelph Police and was told it was stolen from Toronto.
Unfortunately, then the vehicle being stolen property was seized and towed from the police station and taken into custody, essentially, so it could be returned to the owner.
He lost the car and his money.
That was bad experience, the worst experience in my life.
Ghadimi moved to Guelph about 3 months ago from Iran. Before leaving, he sold almost everything he owned.
That was all of my assets, all of my money. And how can I lose it?
Police say their biggest tip to avoid this is to make sure there's a used vehicle information package.
It is required by the Highway Traffic Act that anyone selling a used vehicle, buy that package and provide it to the buyer. So that would identify who the registered owner is, if there's any outstanding liens, that kind of thing.
Ghadimi is holding out hope that somehow he'll get his money back, and he's sharing his story to help others avoid the same situation.
I'm not the first one, but there is no voice for these kind of people.
Stephanie Davis, CTV News, Guelph.
The search continues tonight for 2 people who are still missing after a group of hikers fell through the ice on Charleston Lake in eastern Ontario. The incident serving as a scary reminder about staying safe in the mild conditions. CTV's Jack Richardson reports.
A desperate search is underway here at Charleston Lake Provincial Park. Ontario Provincial Police setting up a command center to try and find 2 missing men who fell through the ice on Sunday.
So it started yesterday evening, just before 5 p.m. That's when we had reports of a male saying that he and 2 other males, had fallen through the ice on Charleston Lake.
The 3 men were going for a hike when disaster struck. Police say one of the men managed to pull himself out of the water and find someone nearby who called 911. Now, underwater search and rescue teams are scouring the lake and helicopters are searching from above.
Being that it's not a river, we're not expecting a lot of current underneath the ice, which will help. However, it is quite deep. So we are pinpointing where they should be if they are submerged.
Police continue to stress that people should stay off of the ice, especially with recent mild temperatures, making the conditions unpredictable. Jack Richardson, CTV News, Charleston Lake.
In Gaza, officials say at least 67 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes overnight. The bombardment caused devastation in Rafah, which is now packed with about 1.4 million people, most of whom fled their homes. Dozens of explosions were heard at around 2 a.m., leaving flattened homes and tents. Officials say Israel's offensive in the Gaza Strip has killed more than 28,000 people, displaced over 80% of the population, and set off a massive humanitarian crisis.
Israel says those overnight attacks were used as cover as its forces stormed a heavily guarded apartment in Rafah to rescue 2 hostages. The 2 men were reunited with their families today. The pair was abducted from a kibbutz during the deadly Hamas attack in Israel on October 7th. They are among just 3 hostages to be rescued. The Israeli military released video today showing what it says is the rescue of the 2 hostages. Soldiers broke into a second-floor apartment, exchanging gunfire with Hamas fighters guarding the 2 men.
We were so happy to see them. I don't know what is the real situation that they are. Mentally, they look okay. Physically, they look okay. But I'm sure that, we're going to have ups and downs in the coming days or weeks. And we really hope for good, and we wish them good health.
I've heard of the news this morning, and I was rushing to this hospital and to be together with my family. And it was very emotional to see them, to hug them, to feel them. It feels almost unreal.
Rallies and protests continue in Israel as about 100 hostages remain in captivity. Dozens were freed during a ceasefire in November. 1,200 people were killed in the Hamas attack that started the war.
As Israel prepares for a ground offensive in Rafah, there are more calls for it to reconsider that move.
And it really, we think, is impossible to see how you can fight a war amongst these people. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't go south into Egypt. They can't go north and back to their homes because many have been destroyed. So we are very concerned about the situation, and we want Israel to stop and think very seriously before it takes any further action.
There is a deep sense of panic and anxiety regarding the prospect of an unfolding military operation also in Rafah. As we all know, the price the civilian population has paid is unspeakable.
Today, a prosecutor at the International Criminal Court expressed concern about the situation in Rafah and said the court is actively investigating any alleged crimes in the Gaza Strip. Israel's described the southern city as the last remaining Hamas stronghold, but the U.S. has warned the Israelis they should not conduct a military operation there without a credible plan to protect civilians.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is also expressing concern about what's happening.
What the Netanyahu government is asking them to do, which is to leave again, is unacceptable because they have nowhere to go. And so that's why we need right now for the violence to stop. We need a sustainable ceasefire. We need a hostage deal. Hostages must be released and humanitarian aid must go in.
The United States also pressed Israel today to work towards a pause in the fighting. American officials say some progress has been made in negotiations, but more work needs to be done. The Dutch government, meantime, has been ordered to block all exports of F-35 fighter jet parts to Israel. An appeals court in the Netherlands ruled in favor of a lawsuit brought by human rights groups. In its decision, the court said there is a clear risk the plane parts are used in serious violations of international humanitarian law. The government says it will appeal, insisting it should be up to the state to set foreign policy, not a court. Israel denies committing abuses.
The U.S. Northeast is bracing for a fast-moving winter storm.
Expecting snow across the city tonight and into tomorrow. The current forecast calls for light rain beginning around midnight and transitioning to snow tomorrow morning. We expect at least 5 to 8 inches now. We could get more. As the forecasts continue to shift, we will continue to notify New Yorkers.
New York could also see high wind gusts and coastal flooding. Motorists are being asked to stay off the roads tomorrow, and schools will hold remote classes. The storm is forecast to head north later in the day. A state of emergency has been declared in Boston, where more than 30 centimeters of snow is expected. Classes in all schools are canceled tomorrow.
In Washington, Donald Trump is asking the Supreme Court to extend the delay in his election interference trial. Lawyers for the former U.S. president filed an emergency appeal today. They argue Trump is immune from prosecution on charges he plotted to overturn his 2020 election loss. There is no timetable for the court to act, but its decision could determine whether the GOP frontrunner stands trial in the case before the November presidential election. 4 days ago, the justices heard Trump's separate appeal to remain on the ballot despite a ruling by a Colorado court to remove him.
The United Nations says a large portion of the animal kingdom is under threat of extinction. More than 1/5 of the world's migrating species are at risk, according to a report released today. Billions of animals make journeys across deserts, plains, or oceans every year to breed and feed. But the UN warns they're in danger because of habitat loss, illegal hunting and fishing, pollution, and climate change. About 44% of the species are in decline, and 22% could vanish completely. The cost of just about everything is on the rise, and soon the price of alcohol will also increase. The federal government planning to raise the alcohol excise tax in the coming months.
The tax is set to increase 4.7% in April, and not surprisingly, people are not thrilled. CTV's Dave Charbonneau has more.
Starting April 1st, places like Lil Z's Pizza will have to start charging more for a beer.
We make our living on nickel and dimes. You know, those margins are so thin that anything that, cuts into that is always, a bit of a threat to that bottom line.
The federal government is raising the alcohol excise tax by 4.7% on April 1st, at a time when many restaurants are still struggling to recover after the pandemic.
We don't really know yet what is the new norm. Because we're 4 years removed from the first government shutdown from COVID. So since then, numbers have been all over the place.
The federal tax increases annually by the rate of inflation. Restaurants Canada is calling for a 2% cap on the increase.
Right now, we're at 63% of operators that are barely breaking even. So they don't really have a choice that they have to pass it down to customer.
The industry is struggling right now, whether it's the brewers, whether it's the restaurants, the industry is struggling right now. And an extra tax increase is only going to make it harder on the whole industry.
Owner of Kitchissippi Beer, Paul Meek, says the increase couldn't come at a worse time.
I have a couple options. I can absorb the hit and make 4.7% less. I can take a small amount where I absorb some of it and increase our prices, or I can increase the whole thing. And then now that makes the restaurants more expensive, and then they charge it through to the customer.
Last week, the Ford government announced a 2-year provincial tax freeze on beer and wine. But with everything costing more these days, small businesses say the federal increase hurts more than it helps.
Numbers are nowhere near where they were pre-pandemic. People just aren't coming into restaurants.
We know that taxes are important to help the government flow through, but this is definitely hurting a struggling industry at this time.
Dave Charbonneau, CTV News.
Coming up, Super Bowl 58 is in the history books, and it was a thriller from the field to the stage and in the stands, a roundup of the big moments from a night to remember.
And I'm Pat Foran. Coming up on Consumer Alert, losing your wallet can lead to all kinds of problems. So can leaving behind your credit card. A Richmond Hill man forgot his credit card when he was buying lunch, and within hours, someone ran up more than $5,000 in charges. I'll have my reports just ahead.
Well, we're looking at a rain-snow mix or wet flurries and very gusty winds tomorrow. Considerable wind chill. And if you're looking for snow, there very likely is more of it on the way. We're looking ahead to Thursday, where we might see a fair bit of accumulation in the GTA and beyond. So I'll have more details about that coming up. And stay with us. We've got another full night of great shows for you right here on CTV.
Losing your wallet or credit card can be a major hassle, especially if it falls into the wrong hands.
And if you do lose your credit or bank card, you need to tell your financial institution right away. And even then, you could be held liable for losses. Here's Pat Foran and Consumer Alert. Pat.
Thanks, Michelle. And Nathan, a man says he was buying his lunch when he left behind his credit card. Within hours, someone had racked up more than $5,000 in charges, and he was told he's responsible for the missing money.
It can happen to me. It can happen to others.
Vincent Wu of Richmond Hill says one afternoon he bought lunch at a food court and mistakenly left behind his credit card. About 3 hours later, he got a message saying his card had been blocked due to strange activity.
I got the email from Neo Financial saying that my card or account is frozen because of suspicious transactions.
Wu was told there were $5,700 worth of fraudulent charges that had taken place at 3 Shoppers Drug Marts within 3 hours of him losing his card. The transactions were made using a personal identification number, and because a PIN was used, Wu was told he must have given out his PIN, so the $5,700 would not be reimbursed.
I can 100% ensure that I didn't give out my PIN, and I never visit those shoppers.
These bad actors act incredibly quickly.
Norton Identity offers LifeLock, a security product to prevent fraud and identity theft. The company says if you lose your wallet or credit card, contact your bank and credit card companies, check for unusual activity, change your passwords, get identity theft protection, and file a police report. Ian Bednowitz says you should have a list of everything you have in your wallet, try to leave as much as possible at home, and don't carry your social insurance number.
Ideally, you don't want to have a long inventory. You want to carry as little as possible with you to limit your vulnerability if you do lose something.
CTV News reached out to Neo Financial on behalf of Wu. The company reviewed his case again, and a spokesperson said, "We can confirm that the charges have been removed from the customer's account, and they will not be required to make any payments related to these charges." So the $5,700 was returned to Wu, which was great news for him.
You guys are amazing. You guys are amazing, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, CTV. You're wonderful.
And never write your PIN down in your wallet or use a number that is easy to guess. If you do, you could also have your claim denied if someone makes fraudulent charges on your card. On your side, I'm Pat Foran.
If you have a consumer story idea, email us at alert@ctv.ca.
We are in a tough respiratory virus season, and some are experiencing a lingering cough even after feeling better otherwise. Here's why that may be happening.
Usually this is the cough that persists following the infection. And, the infection, be it from a bacterial pneumonia, from a upper respiratory viral infection, usually that infection is gone. And this cough can persist anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks after the infection has resolved.
New research suggests post-infectious cough symptoms can affect up to a quarter of adults following an initial infection, such as a cold or flu. Doctors say in most cases the cough will go away on its own without any medication or treatment. Frustrating, though, because when you're still coughing, people think you're still sick, and you say, no, I'm fine. Sure.
Everybody says they're fine, but maybe you're not fine.
I don't know. Uh-oh. How are we weather-wise?
We're doing fine. We're doing fine. I mean, we've certainly seen a slightly milder day than normal today. Not as mild as we were earlier, later last week, but 4 degrees is the high versus a normal high of -1. So not too badly. We are looking at some snowfall on the way this week, which I think might make some people happy, and it is in the 7-day forecast. So we'll talk about when and how much coming up. Weather is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train. So earlier today, 4 degrees. Now we're sitting at 2 degrees in the city of Toronto. Feels more like -1 when you factor in the winds. Winds have not been too much of the story today. That's going to change as we get into the morning, especially tomorrow. We're actually dipping a little bit cooler in our overnight lows than originally anticipated. So now I'm projecting over towards -5, feeling like -10, but that's in the early morning hours. If you're in areas like Waterloo or Peterborough, we're around -8, -9, and a normal overnight low for this time of the year would be -8 for the city of Toronto. So we're not quite there, but we're getting closer, and we'll get even, I would say, right on the money as we get into Tuesday night. Tomorrow, looking at a high of 3 degrees, feeling like -1. You want to factor in the fact that we'll have winds out of the northwest as we get into the morning tomorrow and through the day. 30 to 50 kilometers an hour, and that is tapping into a much cooler air mass, and also just the speed of the gusts is going to give us much more of a wind chill. So it's going to feel colder tomorrow than it did today for sure. If we look at our satellite and radar imagery, we see we've had a little bit of flurry activity for eastern Ontario, and this system moving from the west, it's going to start moving through into the GT as we get into tomorrow. So the associated front really going to bring a little bit of precipitation. We've got that colder air in behind it, and it's going to be a bit of a change for us. Even as we rebound temperatures a little bit on Wednesday, we're still going to see things feel a little bit cooler. Speaking of what we're experiencing, Great Lakes ice coverage very low this time of the year. So that gives us an indication that we've been milder. It's very unsafe to be out on the lakes right now. And we also have the potential for some more lake effects. So I'm going to show you how that might happen, because the colder air over the open waters of the upper Great Lakes gives us that lake effect snow. So system associated snow moving through tomorrow, rain, snow mixing, or wet flurries. And then in behind it, we get these streamers setting up off the lake here for Tuesday night into Wednesday, and then some clearing as we get into Wednesday. So here's your 7-day forecast. -8 after a high of 3 tomorrow, and -5 tomorrow tonight, feeling like -14 overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, and then we'll have some sunshine at 0 degrees, 0 again for Thursday, accumulating snow 5 to 10 centimeters, and then we get sunny afterwards for the weekend. Back to you, Nathan.
All right, thanks, Michelle. It's another sign of the warmer weather we've been experiencing lately. Maple syrup season is arriving early at some Ontario sugar bushes. CTV's Rita Ismail has more.
A Canadian tradition is off to a good start. Volunteers at the Kinsman Fanshawe Sugar Bush are busy boiling sap, making maple syrup.
So this year, it seems we're a lot earlier. Last year, we were actually boiling on the 13th of February. This year, we've started quite a bit earlier. This is our 4th day of boiling right now.
Kinsman is the only not-for-profit sugar bush in Canada. It harvests sap from about 1,300 taps, each one producing approximately 1 liter of sap, depending on the season.
Because it's been so warm, the trees were giving a lot of sap, and now they've actually really slowed down. And so right now, we have hardly any sap coming in because it has been so warm. So this is what brings the sap on the vacuum to our extractor shed.
Van Morsel, who's in his 7th year of boiling maple syrup, says it's a science. With fluctuating temperatures, it's become difficult to predict the length of the production season.
It all depends on, as long as we keep getting those minus temperatures at night, -5, and +10 during the day, this season will go on for quite a while. Eventually, just like they always sit there and say, all good things must come to an end.
The maple syrup season historically began in early April or late March, but over the years, a change in climate patterns has slowly pushed back the start date into February.
It is what it is. We can't do what, Mother Nature is Mother Nature, and we can't do anything about it. All we can do is hope for a good season.
Kinsman will officially open for public tours this upcoming Family Day weekend, serving breakfast and offering educational guided tours. Rita Ismail, CTV News.
Also tonight, hats off to a Canadian designer who has been chosen among the world's best hat makers to showcase her creations at Milan Fashion Week.
Carnival is in full swing.
And revelers in northeastern Brazil are celebrating while delivering a green message. How about that? They're decked out in noisy outfits made from beer cans and pop cans. Each costume is made from about 1,600 cans gathered over months. These cans are grouped by color and type and attached with a small nylon wire to overalls. This street party was founded in 1997 and was born out of concern over the mountain of cans left behind in the town following Carnival. Well, in just a few short years, an Ontario hat maker has ascended to the pinnacle of fashion.
She's taking her designs to Milan and will be featured as one of the best hat makers in the world. CTV's Dylan Dyson reports.
This is going to be based on vintage Barbie.
Renelle Larocque can design a hat based on any idea.
This one is, so I'm obsessed with the James Webb Telescope.
Located in downtown Perth, Queen Bee Millinery has been making women's hats professionally for just 5 years.
I make headwear for the races. That's my specialty. So if you're going to Royal Ascot or the Kentucky Derby or the King's Plate here in Canada, I tend to make most of my hats for those.
Each piece so unique it attracted the attention of the fashion capital of the world. In the lead up to Fashion Week, Larocque is one of 12 milliners from across the world to be invited to Milan, Italy for the first ever international hat exhibition.
I am the only Canadian that's going to be there, which is really amazing. There's milliners from all over the world.
Inspired by royal fashion, Larocque has created this piece in honor of the Queen for the event.
The Queen's handbag was a powerful messenger. Like, it told her people, I'm ready to move along, or I need this, that, or the other thing.
Queen Bee Millinery's small boutique here in Perth will be closed the rest of February as it caps off the month in Milan, looking to fascinate the fashion capital of the world with its unique Canadian and British-inspired designs.
This one's actually inspired by the oak trees along the fence line on my farm. I'm really excited to showcase Canadian talent in fashion and just showing that hats are still relevant in fashion and Canadian fashion.
After featuring on the world's runway, Larocque isn't quite sure how she'll keep a lid on her small hat boutique.
When Milan, it calls, you just say yes, like it's an automatic yes.
Dylan Dyson, CTV News, Perth.
After the break, scary to some or downright romantic. Why the Toronto Zoo wants you to know flowers wilt, but cockroaches are forever.
Today is a victory for workers, for Ontario's labour movement, and for our healthcare, education, and public services.
Updating our top stories, that was the reaction today after Ontario's Court of Appeal declared a bill holding public sector wage increases at 1% a year unconstitutional. Now the province says it will not appeal this court's decision and will repeal Bill 124 in the coming weeks.
I recently went out for a shift last week, a 2-hour shift, and the total earnings for that shift were $5.40. So I can speak in experience that we are facing a crisis.
Toronto ride-hailing drivers will join a worldwide strike on Wednesday. The drivers say they regularly make less than the minimum wage of $16.55 an hour.
They don't believe that an emergency is a reason that all the rules are thrown out the window.
The Auditor General says the federal government ignored its own policies and drove up the cost of the ArriveCan app by relying on outside contractors. Karen Hogan estimates the app cost nearly $60 million, but the final amount will never be known because the project was so badly mismanaged.
In business, oil is up 7% this year, and merger mania continues in the U.S. energy industry. With more, here's Andrew Bell from B&M Bloomberg.
Hello there. Oil prices edged higher today after last week's 6% jump. Meanwhile, U.S. energy producers are continuing their string of huge mergers. Shares of Diamondback Energy rose more than 9% today after that company agreed to buy privately held Endeavor Energy in a deal valued at $26 billion US. Both companies are focused on the Permian field in West Texas and New Mexico. Another Permian player, Pioneer Natural Resources, was swallowed by Exxon last year in a deal worth about $64 billion. On the markets, the Canadian dollar was at 74.35 US cents, up a fraction. WTI oil changed hands at $76.82, up 5 cents. Western Canadian Select, according to our latest fix, was $57.52, up 97 cents. And the TSX Composite ended the day at 21,067.3, up just under 58 points. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of B&M Bloomberg.
The Business Report is brought to you by Canadian Western Bank, the bank built for business.
The Super Bowl sure has evolved. It is so much more than just a football game.
From the halftime show to the commercials, it's appointment viewing and appointment discussing. CTV's Andrea Case joins us now with the talk outside of the game. Andrea.
Nathan, Michelle, good evening. In case you missed it yesterday, the score was 25-22 for the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, it looks like a lot of people watch for a number of reasons, whether it's the dynasty, which really is truly now the Kansas City Chiefs, the love story of TNT, or the halftime show. This Super Bowl had something for everyone. Oh, the joy of having your own private jet. Taylor Swift made it to Las Vegas after her final of 4 shows in Tokyo on Saturday night. She was joined by her famous friends, musician Lana Del Rey, Ice Spice, and Blake Lively. There were lots of shots of them in the private box with boyfriend Travis Kelce's parents and brother. From biting her nails to jumping for joy after the win, the cameras captured her every moment. And they learned a lesson once on the field. After their last embrace and kiss 2 weeks ago, Travis at one point held up a towel to block any lip readers out there.
Penalties. Paging Travis Kelce.
Backlash from Swifties after Kelce surprised his 65-year-old Kansas City coach on the sidelines, yelling at him to put him in the game after a fumble on the field. After the game, Coach Andy Reid says it's all good, and he wasn't expecting the approach. That's why he stumbled, and says he was fine with it, adding it's not the first time. Taylor Swift fans are urging her to break up with him after the outburst. The halftime show starring Usher was a big draw for many. Usher brought not only the stars of the Las Vegas Strip, including dancers and Cirque du Soleil performers, but musical guests, including Alicia Keys, who started off on a bit of a bad note, but hey, this is live music. Also making an appearance, will.i.am, Her on guitar, and Ludacris and Lil Jon. There were lots of memorable Super Bowl commercials, but it was a slam dunk for Dunkin' Donuts. Ben Affleck is back for his latest in a series of spots for his favorite donut shop. This time he brought along Matt Damon and 7-time Super Bowl winner and former New England Patriot quarterback Tom Brady, crashing wife J-Lo's recording session.
Are we going to be on the album?
We talked about this. It's cold. It's going to be #1. Who are we kidding? And why not use the Super Bowl to promote yourself? Beyonce not only announced she's releasing a new album, her 8th, Renaissance Act 2, and it's a country album. The Houston native released 2 new songs, Texas Hold'em and 16 Carriages, which will school us on the history of country music's black roots. Release date, March 29th. Reporting for CTV News, I'm Andrea Case.
Tonight, a community in shock and mourning.
The laying of 5 first-degree murder charges.
Police reveal new details on the deaths of a Manitoba mother, her 3 kids, and a teenage relative. Later on CTV National News.
The Toronto Zoo is offering a unique gift this Valentine's Day. For a $25 donation, the zoo will name a cockroach in honor of your Valentine, or maybe your ex. The deal includes a personalized digital certificate of adoption featuring the adopter's name and the cockroach's name. The zoo is also offering the option to adopt capybaras. That may be the cuter option.
cockroaches are seen by some as a scary animal or something you don't want around. But in fact, cockroaches play a really vital role in the ecosystem. They break down organic matter. They're food for other creatures. And here's the thing, flowers will wilt and chocolate will be eaten, but cockroaches are forever. So they're actually a very positive spin on Valentine's. And we really wanted to portray that really unique. You can send a cockroach to someone you love just as much as a capybara. So that was our program for this year.
The Toronto Zoo's Wildlife Conservancy has raised more than $13 million since 2019.
For the record, I don't want a cockroach.
No.
Just donate to the zoo.
Isn't that nice?
No need for the cockroach.
Isn't that nice that they're forever, though? Isn't that lovely?
They really
Yes.
are.
Well, you know what's not forever? Weather. Everything will change. So we, again, have a bit of a change into some cooler temperatures as we get later into the week. We are looking at an overnight low of -5 tonight, feeling like -10. Tomorrow, gusty winds, rain, snow mixing. Snow on Thursday.
Oh, wow. We're talking snow finally. Once again, thank you, Michelle. That's it for us. But be sure to join Omar Sachedina tonight at 11 for CTV National News, followed by Natalie Johnson with our next local newscast at 11:30.
In the meantime, our coverage continues anytime on CP24 and online at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Michelle Jobin and all of us here at CTV News, thank you for watching and have a great night.